So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am glad to note that we have people listening from places ranging from the US West Coast to Portugal, and like where I am in Connecticut, places in between. Welcome to the panelists and welcome to all of our listeners. This afternoon's topic is investing in Portugal. How to do it, where to start. I'm Joe Santos. I'm a proud member of PALCUS, and I'm the host and moderator for today's discussion. I want to give a special thanks to the PALCUS organization and its partners for organizing this event, for which we have an exciting lineup of speakers. In addition to an opening by Minister Pedro Siza Vieira, who will join us by videotape, we have 3, possibly 4, expert panelist speakers. I'll introduce them in more detail later, but they are Miguel Fontes, Executive Director of Startup Lisboa in Lisboa, Olga Benquerença, Head of Investment for the United States and Canada at AICEP, resident in New York, Guilherme Dray, a law partner at Macedo Vitorino law firm in Lisboa and a law professor at the University of Lisbon. And we also possibly may get Stephan Morais, who is a lead partner at Indico Capital in Lisbon. So let's start. First, Minister Pedro Siza Vieira was a law professor at several universities, including Lisboa, Católica, Porto, and Coimbra. He was a practicing lawyer for several years in Lisbon. He then was minister assistant to the Prime Minister from 2017 to 2018. And he is now the Minister of State, Economy, and Digital Transition. And please take note of that title because particularly economy and digital transition is a great part of what we are about today. As mentioned, Minister Vieira is appearing by video. Let's listen to him now, and then we will move to the discussion.
Warm greetings to all participants in this video conference of the Portuguese American Leadership Council of the United States. I want not only to greet you on this occasion, but invite you to look deeply into the opportunities for investment in Portugal. Whilst we are living in the midst of a very severe crisis, both economic and social, due to the need to fight the COVID-19 pandemic, the truth is that this is the opportunity for investment. It is during these times of crisis that those who invest to seek opportunities can reap the greatest rewards going forward. And Portugal has a lot to offer, both in terms of opportunities for investment, but also in terms of potential rewards. In these past few years, as you may have noticed, Portugal has been growing up and enhancing its profile on the international scene. We are an open country with a population which is open to diversity and different cultures, very skilled in terms of languages, and whose education levels have been growing steadily. In particular, our universities and schools in terms of science, engineering, and maths have been reaching highest levels in terms of international recognition. Our students, our graduates are going to different places in the world to take advantage of their capability and their excellent training, but also we have been attracting young talent to study in our universities. This has allowed Portugal to become a hub for technological prowess. Investments, both in terms of engineering centers, development centers for software, and industrial capabilities, which are well connected to our engineering skills, have been growing steadily in the past few years. It is a country which is welcoming for foreigners, both in terms of investment. We don't discriminate investment by reason of nationality, but also in terms of those who, being skilled offering skilled labor to their employers, are coming to this country to conduct here their lives, their businesses, and their professional activities. We have been offering facilities for visas for skilled workers. We have a very significant tax benefits for skilled workers who come to live in Portugal. And we have been working hand in hand with investors to identify the best opportunities, whether in industrial capabilities, in engineering and development centers, in service to work for the whole European community, a market of 500 million inhabitants, or to exploit the close connections we have with all the contexts of the Southern Atlantic, Africa, Brazil, and being the hub for a market of almost 300 million consumers who speak Portuguese around the world. So I invite you to come here. Do not forget, Lisbon is the closest city in Europe to any point in the Americas. We have excellent connections to the United States, so you will feel welcome. And the very old and strong relationship with the United States, with whom we share values, we are allies with, is the most is testament to the excellent relationships and the warm welcome we provide to everyone who comes from the US. And in particular, those of Portuguese descent should be looking into developing the ties that connects you to your motherland. Welcome to Portugal, and I look forward to know your investment prospects and help you and assist you in the work you will be doing in the coming years.
Are we back, Lisa?
You are.
All right. So my thanks to Minister Vieira and to the ministry, his staff at the ministry, for putting that together and sending this message specific to the PALCUS conference and specific to the topic that we are discussing today. We'll now move on to the panel presentations, and then followed by discussion, and then questions from the audience. And please, in the audience, if you want to ask a question, although you are muted, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen, and it will come to us. I'll introduce each panelist just before each of them speaks, and when they have spoken, we'll move on to the discussion phase. So first, Miguel Fontes is Executive Director of Startup Lisboa, which is a key startup incubator in Lisbon. He graduated from AICEP at the University of Lisboa. He worked with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres when he was in the Portuguese government, and now he heads up the business support activities at Startup Lisboa. Miguel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joe. So it's a pleasure. First of all, let me say that's a privilege and an honor to be here with all of you, and thank you for having me today. And yes, as you said, I'm the Executive Director of Startup Lisboa. And Startup Lisboa, let me just briefly to present you. It's an incubator that is here in Lisbon for the last almost 9 years, and it's here to help entrepreneurs, namely those who are connected with what we call startups, so with business model related with scalability, innovation, and where technology plays a major role, of course, and we are here to help them. And how we do this, just in brief to explain, we try to help them in 5 ways, if you want. The first one is to give them access to a very good network of mentors. We know that mentorship is a very critical key factor in this process. Secondly, we do the same with strategic partners. I can give you just a few examples. Of course, we work very close with the tech companies in Portugal like Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Cisco, and so on, but also with law firms, because all the entrepreneurs, they have always questions related with the legal aspects of the activity. So mentorship, partnership, the third element of our value proposition is related with the investors. We try to do the right match between investors and the founders of startups, namely business angels, but also VCs, so venture capitalists. So what we try to do is to do the right match, because as you know, sometimes a VC just invest in a certain stage of the activity, or just imagining a SaaS or marketplace or whatever. And what we try is to do the right match between the investment thesis and the needs of the founders. And we do also something very important for them in the beginning, that means to help them with what we call the awareness of the projects. We try to help them to be known in the community, in the society, and for that you use a lot, of course, our social media, and LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, of course. And finally, and we think this is the most distinctive aspect about ourselves, and we try to do our best on that. It's all about community. We really believe on community, not just because we think it's a generous and beautiful idea, but because we believe it's the right way to accelerate the go-to-market, because they have the possibility to learn from each other if we create the right environment where they feel comfortable to share, even knowing that they are facing different problems, different business models. What we know is they are facing the same kind of needs, the same kind of challenge, and we need to help them to feel comfortable to share and to support each other. And when they do that, magic happens, because of course they can do it in a very efficient way. So community is very, very important about our job. So basically, and in the general terms, this is Startup Lisboa, and Joe, before we started, asked me to present you the Startup Lisboa value proposition. That's why I started by doing this, and for now I think it's better to stay here and give the floor to another one.
Miguel, before we move on to Olga, I want to ask you a question about the mentorship program at Startup Lisboa. So if an entrepreneur comes to you with an idea, tell us about how that mentorship program works.
Okay, great. So we are basically focused on what we call the early stage. That means we are working with founders that they have already a few customers, but they are basically trying to do the minimum viable product, to do the product market fit, to try to validate the idea. And sometimes they just have an idea, sometimes they have already more than an idea, some execution. And what they need is basically they need customers, they need, of course, to have access to the key persons in the sector of activity where they are. And mentors, we try to work with a very different group of mentors. That means what? We try to have people with a background, imagine in tech, in technology, and they can help them in a particular aspect of the technological side of the project. But we try to have also mentors that they can bring value to the founders, because they know very well one industry, one sector, one market, or because they are very well connected and they can open doors to these founders. So mentorship, it's not a tutorial relationship. That means the same founder, the same startup, he or she has access to different mentors during the journey that they have here inside Startup Lisboa, and not only one mentor. So it's not that kind of relationships. That means sometimes people think that one mentor is always there to follow the project, to follow the founder. No, we try to expose different mentors, because we really believe they need different approach, and so it works like that. And we try to do this in a very efficient way. The mentors, they are doing this for pro bono, That means there are people that want to give back because they have been in that position before. They were themselves founders, or because they really like to do this kind of activity, or for other reasons. And what they do is they tell us every single month the slots of availability that they have, and we try to organize this in a digital way where people can book directly these sessions with the mentors and build a relationship with them. So it's a very easy way of doing this. Yeah.
Thank you. And we have one question before we move on, which is whether Startup Lisboa is modeled after accelerator programs or like Y combinations.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Whether Startup Lisboa is modeled after accelerator programs, such as we might see in the United States.
Mm-hmm. We are a non-profit association, so it's a little bit different. We don't compare like iCombinator or 500 Startups or Techstars, because what they do is they accelerate the projects and they take some equity from them in this process. Because we are a non-profit association, we have been founded by the will of the citizens of Lisbon through what we call the participatory budget. A few years ago, the citizens of Lisbon, they decided it could be a good idea to have an incubator like Startup Lisboa based here in downtown of Lisbon. And so they voted for this project. And after, the municipality of Lisbon tried to find, in that moment, the right partners to create this association. And we had in the beginning the municipality of Lisbon, IAPME, this is our national agency to support small and medium companies, and also Montepio Geral, a non-profit association that is the owner of one private bank. Now, in our days, we have 3 more affiliates in our association. That means Catholic University, Roland Berger, a consultancy firm, and Delta Cafés, which a huge player here in Portugal related with coffee, precisely. And what we do is we help them. We try to create the right environment, as I explained before, in order to help them to grow and to develop their business, but we don't take any kind of equity for them. But we work very closely with others in what we call our ecosystem. That means we do a lot of intros to these kind of institutions like that are responsible for these programs, acceleration programs, or corporate world, or so on and so on. So what we are doing here is more related to what we can call a supportive role, and it's business oriented, but it's not profitable for us. Okay.
Very good. Thank you very much. So I want to move on to Olga Benquerença, and Olga is the head of investment for the United States and Canada on behalf of the Portuguese Trade and Investment Agency, or AICEP. She's based in New York, but spends a great deal of her time in Portugal as well. And in this role, Olga is in charge of finding new investment opportunities for North American-based companies to go to Portugal. I'll make an editorial comment, which is that AICEP's focus, as I'm sure Olga will tell you, is on large investments, but she can also offer information about small ones. Also, Olga graduated from Instituto Superior de Comunicação Empresarial de Lisboa, and she is currently resident in New York. Olga, welcome your comments.
Thank you, Joe. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, on behalf of AICEP and personally, I would like to thank Palcos and Joe Santos for the opportunity of having a seat in this amazing panel. It's always an honor to represent Portugal, especially in a forum with Portuguese descendants and Americans that are interested in knowing more about our country. So my name is Olga. Joe introduced me already. I'm in New York City, and I would like to start with some words about AICEP. We are the Portuguese Trade and Investment Agency, a government business entity. The headquarters are in Portugal, and we are located in more than 50 different places overseas. AICEP is your one-stop shop agency. In the US, AICEP has offices in the East Coast, here in New York, and West Coast, San Francisco, where we have as well a team. Everywhere we are, our mission is to increase Portugal's competitiveness and reputation by giving a boost to structural productive investment, mainly big size companies like Joe said, but of course we support all type of sectors, all type of companies. As soon as they have interest in Portugal, I'll be here to help and to provide all the support. And the other very important mission is making Portuguese companies international in scope, increasing their exports and the investment abroad. In this case, it is with special emphasis on small and medium-sized companies. As a one-stop shop agency, our support in each market is global and transversal. Having that said, the main scope of intervention, just to give you a concrete measure, is large companies with an annual revenue of more than 80 million US dollars and or investment projects over 29 million US dollars. But anyway, as I said, we can help any type of company to start looking into Portugal and to give their first steps in the country. All companies investing in Portugal have a key account manager to help them during all steps of the investment process. About myself, so here in the US, my main goal is targeting North American companies to show Portugal and promoting it as a country to invest in, and I would say the best in Europe. And for that purpose, my role is to stimulate large companies to think in Portugal as their prime investment destination, seeking to meet their expectations, providing the best guidance and tailored information when needed. It's not just general information, to ensure the success of their investment projects. Together with AICEP in Portugal, we coordinate contacts with all the Portuguese entities involved in investment processes. And we establish programs, agenda programs to visit Portugal. We put the companies in contact with peer companies, with public entities, whatever it's needed and relevant for their operation. AICEP has a very, very experienced team in Portugal to welcome the investors at any time. About opportunities, I would say that this is a very good moment to invest in a country with talent, safety, we are the most peaceful country in Europe, and quality of life, and of course, pastel nut in every corner. We will go in detail in sectors of opportunity during this talk, following Joe's questions. Joe, back to you.
Thank you, Olga, and thank you for those comments. I just, picking up on that last point, when you spend time in Portugal, what's your favorite aspect?
Well, the quality of life, I have to say. I love to live here in the US, I love to live in New York, but you really can't compare. Your money worth much more in Portugal than it does here, yeah. Even comparing, or even the comparison of the salaries. And well, the weather, the food, the fish, I miss fish badly. I always have a lot of fish when I go to Portugal. And well, it's very easy to live in Portugal, I would say.
All right, thank you. And we'll come back to that later, I'm sure. Now I want to introduce Guilherme Dray, who's a practicing lawyer in Lisbon. Guilherme is a partner at Macedo Vitorino law firm. He is also a law professor at the University of Lisboa. He was a visiting law professor at Georgetown Law Center in Washington, D.C. And in his spare time, he writes books and articles about law and politics and economics. And some of these I have actually read with great interest. He's also a wonderful person. Welcome, Guilherme. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Joe. You're very kind. Firstly, let me thank to Palcos and to its organization. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here within this wonderful panel. And as a lawyer and as a professor of law, I will try to give you a general overview on the Portuguese business environment and legal framework regarding regarding investment and foreign investment. For that purpose, I would like to share with you a PowerPoint just to give you briefly some numbers and some data regarding our country. Probably you already know the majority of them, but let me see if it helps. So, why Portugal and why to invest in Portugal? Well, first of all, regarding some numbers and some GDP, I would like to show you that we have been in a good shape since 2013. Our GDP is been growing since then. In 2019, we had a growth of 2.44 GDP. Obviously, this year, everything is different because we are facing the pandemic crisis. And the forecast of the IMF is that we will have a fall of the GDP around 10%. But in normal circumstances, we were increasing our GDP and the country is in good shape in terms of economics. Also in terms of unemployment rate, in 2019, we had a 6.4 rate of unemployment. And as you can see, again, since 2013, it has been decreasing year by year until this year. But even in this year and during this pandemic crisis, we will have a rate of 8.2 or 3%. So I believe we are handling very well with the pandemic crisis. And in terms of some data and how does Portugal compare based on some data from the European Commission, World Economic Forum, OECD and World Bank, well, we may see that Portugal, for example, in 2018, won the best destination in the world of the World Travel Awards. In the World Bank's Doing Business 2019, Portugal ranks now in 34th place and 13 in the European Union. We perform better in the World Economic Forum Global Competitiveness 2019, and we have a high performance in several pillars, for example, infrastructure, health, business dynamism, and also to start a business, we have a wonderful number. The World Bank estimates that it takes only 6.5 days to start a business in Portugal. We compare, for example, with Germany, where that, well, it takes more than that, the same in Switzerland, Spain, Greece, and so on. Also about electrician rate, road quality, infrastructures, the prevalence of non-tariff barriers on products and crime-related incidences, we are very well ranked in all these topics. Here we can see about the location to do business in Europe that we are very well ranked, 39 in the world, this in 23rd in the European Union, and in Europe, not in the European Union. To start a business in Portugal under the World Bank is very easy, as I already told you, 6.5 days to start a business and to set up a corporation. We can do it through an online procedure, and it takes only 1 day to start a business if we want to do it quickly. We are in the 6th place in the Global Competitiveness Report from the World Economic Forum. Portugal is ranked in 60th place in the Doing Business 2009 ranking regarding a license or a construction permit to have access to a concession permit in Portugal. It takes 160 days to obtain it. It's not, well, we could do better on this issue, but nevertheless, it is good. The same in terms of corporate income, we are very well ranked. And we have a very low level of employment disputes. Basically speaking, in Portugal, the number of working days that is lost per 1,000 employees is only 14 days a year. We may compare, for example, with France, which is very, very big, 125 days. So we have a very low level of employment dispute, which is very good for the economy and for the production process as a whole. In terms of skills index, as our minister already said, we are very well ranked in the World Economic Forum skills index. Our youngsters are very well skilled and very well prepared to work. And regarding the infrastructures, both road infrastructures, broadband, ports, airports, and so on, we are the 21st best transport. We have the 21st best transport infrastructure in the world. To enforce a contract in Portugal, it takes 755 days. And in terms of the quality of judicial processes, we are also very well ranked. We have a rank of a grade of 13.5 out of 18, so everything runs well regarding the judicial processes. And the same regarding the resolving insolvency. We have a legal framework that is friendly to resolve an insolvency. So I am not an economist, I am not an investor, I am not a guy from the finance, but regarding the segments in which the foreigner people can invest in our country, I believe we have at least 4 or 5 or 6 segments that are very, very good to invest even during this time. The tourism, for example, until the pandemic, tourism increased at a rate of more than 10% since 2013. Obviously, this year is a difficult year, and so things are not running well, but are not running well in Portugal and all over the world. But I believe that after the pandemic, tourism will continue to grow along with international investment in real estate. Also, and Miguel already said something about that, we are a country, a wonderful destiny for digital nomads, for remote workers. Actually, we have thousands of digital nomads currently in Portugal, working in Portugal for different countries all over the world. And so the investment in accommodations for them is also, I believe, a good investment for the near future. Solar energy, Portugal is committed on energy transition, and the government has been launching several auctions to solar energy. And so this is a segment of activity that is also open for investments, foreign investments. Shared services. I recall that Portugal is the location of choice for Altran, Cisco, Europcar, Fujitsu, Xerox, IBM, and many other corporations that has installed in Portugal his service facilities for finance, human resources, IT, and so on. The same with agriculture, forestry, and fishing. There are among Portugal main exporting sectors regarding, for example, olive oil, cork, fresh products, fish, and so on. It's also a good segment to invest. And finally, luxury and fashion. We have several fashion brands that are operating in Portugal. For example, Dior, Louis Vuitton, and so on. So Portuguese brands of clothing and footwear are also the choice of several international personalities and several investors that want to invest in Portugal. So, Joe, to begin, I believe I gave you a general overview regarding the investment environment or the business environment in Portugal. And I tried also to give some examples of segments of economy in which you can invest. Now I will give you back the words, please.
Thank you very much for that overview, and in particular the statistics, which some of which I had not seen and find very, very interesting. And I want to come back to sort of this sort of overall view. By the way, can you give back the screen?
Yes.
But I also want to take you, start the discussion with you, Guilherme, and get right into some specifics. So for example, what legalities, like incorporation and required permits, are involved in starting a business in Portugal? Let's say that someone in the audience or a friend of someone in the audience is interested in or planning to start a business in Portugal. Take us through the necessary legalities. And I think you told us it takes about 6.5 days, but take us through the specifics, if you will.
Yes, of course. Well, it's easy to start a business in Portugal. It is easy to set up a corporation or a branch of a corporation that exists, for example, in the United States. We just have to choose the type of corporation we want to set up in Portugal. We can do it using online procedures. Obviously, it is important, and we will have to have some mandate from the investor who wants to invest in Portugal, but then it's very easy to do it. And even for investment for foreign investors, we may have a permit easily. And so, well, giving the more details, we have been working a lot with foreign investors, and things are, I would say, very easy to. Portugal is an open country for foreign investors.
And Guilherme,
so,
in terms of the actual nuts and bolts of the activity, so let's say if I were going to start a business, would I come to you or to an accountant or to a notary public? How does that work?
You could come to me or to a different lawyer, and we are, well, I would say, very well prepared and shaped to help investors to start a business in Portugal, because we have to deal with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We have to deal with the registry of corporations and so on. But things are today very easy to run with.
And the process for getting the licenses and permits, is it transparent? Will people be treated equally to other people?
Yes, I'm quite sure about that. We apply the rule of law. We are an open country. Nobody is discriminated. And there's transparency in all the administrative procedures. And so we don't have questions regarding bribery and so on. Things today are very clear. And the fact that we have a lot of online procedures is also important to guarantee the transparency and the non-opacity of the process.
Okay, so I want to let you know about something that I think I may have mentioned to you maybe a year ago, which is that about 2 years ago I started the process of building a home in Portugal. And I shook hands with a general contractor, and that was the contract. That was the understanding, sort of the way things were done in my grandparents' time.
Yes.
And then the work didn't get started for 6 months, and then another 6 months went by and the work didn't get started, and I became frustrated, and I decided to do business the American way, which is I fired that contractor, I got a new contractor, and I negotiated a contract, which I now have signed with liquidated damages provisions, and the work is proceeding very timely and very well. My question to you is, Is business in Portugal becoming more this way? Is it becoming more formal like in the United States? What do you recommend to people?
Well, to be honest, I recommend you to sign a contract. Obviously, we can have the law does not impose a written contract. For example, in that case, the rule is that the contract can be only verbal, I would say. It is not an imposition. It is not mandatory to have a written contract, but in terms of security of the contract, in terms of being more easy to enforce the contract, obviously it will be easier and more safer and more safe to have a written contract. And so our recommendation is whenever you sign a contract, try please to do it correctly. And doing it correctly requires a written contract. It is better for both parties and for the balance of the contract and to protect everybody.
I offer myself as a witness to the truth of those statements because I now have the experience to prove it.
Okay, it is safer too.
Olga, back to you if I can. And I'll invite Miguel and Guilherme to comment on this too, but when we talk about the advantages of Portugal, so the minister talked about diversity, education, talent, that it's a welcoming society. You talked about the food earlier. There's one other element that I'd like your view on, especially since you spend most of your time in the United States, and that is for Americans and Canadians who speak only English and not Portuguese. Tell us about what it's like to be able to communicate in Portugal as a business person in English, as opposed to having to do it in Portuguese.
Well, I can tell you an example. I have a friend that is British. He lives in Portugal since 30 years ago. He still doesn't speak Portuguese. And he's a businessman. Actually, he's a very well-known photographer, and he doesn't need to speak Portuguese. It's a shame for him, but he doesn't need to. So he can do everything in English everywhere he goes. Well, of course, in this type of profiles, if you want to hire someone for a complex operation, IT, R&D, software development, in the area of life sciences, even automotive or aerospatial, you will have lots of jargon and all the communication should be mainly in English. So everybody now is prepared to have these type of jobs and to speak a very good level of English, because people now, the kids start learning English at 6 years old. So yeah, it's very easy. And if you only speak English, you will not have a bad experience. And people are very kind, as you know, and they will teach you to say the most important words. And it's not a problem at all. Everybody speaks English. They can speak, lots of people speak French, German, as Luis Castro Henriquez mentioned in the morning. So it's very easy to hire people speaking different languages. And if you only speak English, you'll be totally safe.
Very good, thank you. Miguel, what's your experience with that?
Oh, absolutely the same. More and more, this is a very open society and a cosmopolitan society. For instance, here at Startup Lisboa, when I started my role here 5 years ago, we had almost 20% of foreigners, founders based here in Startup Lisboa in Lisbon, and for now we have half and half. Foreigners and nationals. And one of the reasons why we attract so many foreigners, founders namely, to come to Portugal and to Lisbon is precisely because it's very easy for them to do it, because as Olga was saying, everybody speaks in this environment, in the business environment, and mostly in the startup world, if you can call this like this, everybody speaks English. Even if sometimes it's a bad English, what we call now the Globlish, that's something that you use to communicate, of course, with mistakes, with some fragilities, of course, but it's enough to communicate and to do it. But when you take in consideration the younger generations, of course, it's even better, the situation, because as Olga also said, they started thinking in English, I would say. I look to my kids and it's amazing. It's not because of the school. Of course, school plays a major role, but it's because everything is in English. So they are very exposed to English because of the movies, because of the songs, because of our culture. It's very Anglophonic. Anglophonic, can say that?
Yes.
And that's the question. But the key factor for me nowadays to attract so many foreigners to Portugal is talent. Talent in both sense. That means we have very good national talent, and our national institutions from universities and so on, and research centers, they are very well known internationally, namely when you speak about our engineers, our management, but also with other kind of, in other kind of subjects. But we have good talent and we can attract talent from abroad. And why? Because imagine this situation when you are trying to call to someone to come to an international position, and that someone knows that it will be in Portugal. It's very easy to decide, okay, let's move. I will go with my family. It's not a major issue. And it's not the same, unfortunately for them, for other geographies. I don't want to be impolite with no one, so I don't want to mention no one in particular, but of course it's not the same. And when it's about Portugal, people know that they can come and they will find a very open society without any ethnical issues, with no questions regarding foreigners and so on. And that it's a big asset, unfortunately, in the world that we are living. Unfortunately, this becomes a very important asset, and we are taking advantage of that, because for now Portuguese society is still a very open society, and because we know that we need people from abroad. We are a small country, if you take in general, in international consideration, of course, and we know that it's no longer possible in this economy that we are living now to think just with thinking about our domestic market and about our domestic resources. If we need to, if you want to grow, if you want to be more competitive, if you want to be more relevant in the world, of course we need to start thinking since the day one with a mindset completely international. And for that it's very important to expose our people, our students, also our teacher, our businessmen to this international environment. And that's the way that we are doing now. And that's why I think Web Summit, that probably you know, it's a huge international event related with technology, entrepreneurship, innovation, and so on, is now decided a few years ago to come to Lisbon, and that helps us a lot to put ourselves in the international map, if you want, and bring us a lot of international attention to Portugal. And this helps, of course, to become more relevant in our international economy nowadays.
Thank you. While I have you, there's a question from the audience. What impact have the startups brought to the market in economic development growth? And you might think about, Startup Lisboa is one incubator, but since Startup Lisboa started, there are other incubators. Of course, it hasn't been very long yet, but address that if you could.
Yeah, of course, it's a pleasure. So let me say, it's not, I prefer to answer this one thing. It's not a question of the volume of startups. If you put the startups in comparison with other companies, namely the small and medium traditional companies, of course, the second group is still the biggest one. But the question is, startups brings innovation. Because when you are talking about startups, we are talking about people that are trying to solve old problems in the new way, or even trying to solve new problems. And they know that if they want to have an international company, they need to have scalability. And for that, they need to have a tech solution. So it's a new business model, completely different from the small and medium companies. And when they started, they know that they need, when they start, they know that they need to have a business model that helps them to, with the same kind of resources, to address the world. And they can start in Portugal, but after they need to do the same in other geographies. And this is very important because it's also a way to show to other business activities the way, if you want. And when you think about Talkdesk that is based in the United States, or you think about Unbubble or Define Crowd or Fidzai, just to give you a few examples of Portuguese startups, it's amazing and it's very impressive because it's not easy to find the same quality of examples and the volume of these examples in the traditional sectors, if you want. So, of course, for now, when you put the general numbers, it's not so impressive because, of course, we are talking about a small part of the whole situation, but in terms of what the meaning of that, it's very powerful what startups are doing in our economy, in our society. And I think for now it's clear for everyone that it is no longer a question of young guys playing with new technologies. It's something that comes very seriously. It's the way that we in Portugal, we have to become competitive. I don't want to monopolize, of course, the time, but let me just say this. Digital brings us a unique opportunity to an economy like ourselves in Portugal, because for years and years, people said, and said correctly in my way, that we were a peripheric country because we are so far away from the raw materials, so far away from the big markets of consumers and so on. But within the digital economy, that changed completely. Where you are, it's no longer so relevant like it was in the past. So we have what we need in order to build great companies and to be present with these companies in all over the world. That's my view about it.
Okay, thank you. So
I had something to what Miguel said.
Yes.
No, just to tell that I obviously agree with everything he said, but I will add something. I believe the startups brought us a new way of living, an entrepreneurship spirit that it was not a tradition of Portugal. Usually Portuguese used to work based on an employment contract, the same corporation during his life or her life, but things really had changed, and youngsters, they want to be they want self-determination, they want to be entrepreneurships and so on. So we have a new culture here, and it's very important, and the digital transformation is helping us to create this type of new culture, which is very, very important for the future of the next generations.
Thank you. So we have a number of related questions, two from on Zoom and one from Facebook, which is because we do have listeners on Facebook. First, where can we Portuguese Americans go to learn more about passive investing in VC funds in Portugal? And do we need to be an accredited investor or equivalent? So what I did not say in the beginning is that I am an investor in Portugal. I am currently a passive investor in Portugal, unless you consider my construction of my home there, which would be an active investment. I am considering becoming an active investor in other senses. But in terms of where can you go to learn more about passive investing in VC funds, you can send me an email, and I will, I'm happy to connect with you via email or by telephone. My email is Santos, J, the letter J, .boaterra, BOATERRA @gmail.com. And if I can't answer your specific questions about who to go to, I will connect you with people who will know more. Do you need to be an accredited investor or equivalent? No, you do not. You can be just an ordinary citizen interested in investing or interested in business, and you can become an investor in Portugal. Some funds do have minimum requirements, and that's one of the questions I have from Facebook. In terms of passive investment in VC, funds will have minimum requirements. I have a request to repeat my email address. It is Santos, J, the letter J, .boaterra @gmail.com. So I also have a question with regard to whether there's a minimum investment threshold that people should expect when investing in an existing company. $1,000, $10,000, $100,000, more. Olga, I know that you deal principally with large investments, but you probably have some experience in this area. What do you think?
Well, as I mentioned in the beginning, we work mainly with productive investments. So I really, it's another type of investment. If so, you can go to Portugal and establish a company for services like shared service centers or whatever, or industrial productive investments. In that case, we have the frame of incentives to support the investments, and you have minimums and you have the maximum of support with that incentive. So when you talk about the capital investment, it depends on the companies, if I understood well the question. So that's the thing that I can help you with in this question.
Thank you. And Guilherme, I suppose if it's a purely passive investment from the standpoint of, for example, buying stock in a Portuguese company traded on the Lisbon Stock Exchange, I suppose there's no minimum, right?
No minimum threshold. Yes, you're totally.
It would be
free
only the value of one share of that company.
Yes, you're totally free to invest whatever you want without any minimum threshold.
And Miguel, you see these from the startup phase. And am I right that we could categorize investments, for example, in what Guilherme and I just mentioned to each other? You could have a very small passive investment by buying stock in a Portuguese company through the stock exchange. You could make an investment in a fund of companies such as the Indico fund, in which I'm an investor. By the way, the Indico fund has a minimum. It's a large minimum, but it's doable for many people. So you can invest in a fund that invests in various companies rather than directly into a company. And I suppose you see situations where you have a startup and the startup is seeking new capital and is willing to sell some equity to obtain that capital. Is that fair?
Yeah, exactly. Now we have already Stephan Morais with us, and
yes, I just saw him. Welcome, Stephan.
My sincere apologies. I think there was a mix-up on from my time. My sincere apologies, but I can answer questions at least.
And
Yeah.
Stephan can help me after with more detail, but basically we can say that, of course, you have different stage of companies. Normally you speak about the early stage, and when you speak about the early stage, you speak about seed investment, because that means that someone that is starting needs seed investment. But when that company grows and have more need of funding, it will go through the different phase. When you are talking about venture capital, it goes to a Series A, Series B, and so on and so on. But normally, when you are talking about emerging companies, what you find is, at the beginning, business angels, and you can find people that are connected through each other, through a club that do this, or a small or medium VC firm. And in that case, it depends of the thesis of each VC, the minimum and the conditions where you can take part of these investments. But yes, it's a very easy way to invest in this world. It's with particular rules. Stephan better than me can explain how different means to invest in the startup world, if you want, and through these VC funds. But yes, it's very it's something that it's very open, and we need to bring more investors and more money to this world. Normally we say that in our ecosystem we are looking not only for the money but what we call smart money. And why? Because, as I explained before, it's very important to connect with the right investors that can add value to your business, because they have good connections, because they are already established in a few markets, and so on and so on. But before smart money, you need money. So it's very important to attract these investors to Portugal for sure. But please, Stephan, maybe you want to adjust in more detail, better explanation.
Actually, Stephan, before you do that, let me just introduce you to the audience so they know who you are. Stephan is the founder and managing general partner at Indico Capital in Lisbon, which is a leading VC and private equity firm in Portugal. Stephan has an MBA from Harvard Business School. He has deep experience as an investment banker, and he was an executive board member at Caixa Capital. He's on the board of several companies currently, and he's also fluent in 4 languages. And besides that, he's a very nice human being. So please.
And I'm also very late, so I'm super embarrassed. I got a mix up here in my calendar. I'm sorry for that. I'll try to sort of make up by being short and concise. It's a real pleasure to be here. I think, Miguel, from what I heard already, gave you sort of the highlights. I could only probably sort of rehash a little bit, in a sense that, the Portuguese ecosystem in terms of startups is probably way more evolved and sophisticated than what people think. There's, a small number of unicorns of Portuguese origin, but they do exist. And if you compare that to
Stephan, what is a unicorn?
Oh, by the way, yes. What is a unicorn? So these are companies that are valued at over $1 billion, growth companies, tech companies, that start by being Portuguese and end up being American unicorns, because they normally eventually open up operations in the Valley and set up themselves legally at some stage in Delaware. But the tech teams normally stay in Portugal. The founders are Portuguese, and the engineering and the project is Portuguese, but the sales, of course, need to be American. That's where the specialty of selling is globally. And so there are a few unicorns like that, and we've been very fortunate over the last few years to have found and invested in almost all of them. And indeed, we have quite a lot of investors from all over the world, particularly from the US. The fact that we are, we accept American investors because we are FATCA compliant, which is something which is not very common in Portugal, means that people can invest in our fund and not worry about not complying with taxes and so on. And it's a way of investing. We're obviously very pleased that Joe is one of our investors, and many others, including the former ambassador and Vlad, and many other top executives from Google, Facebook, Uber, and tech lawyers and investment bankers from the tech side. which obviously know our sector. And many of them, in addition to being investors, they then subsequently invest in specific companies in the portfolio. So when they really like an opportunity, they then co-invest with us. And even if they don't invest, many of them, because of their expertise, end up being great advisors for the fund and really adding value to Portugal and adding value to the ecosystem that way, in addition to the company itself. So, I mean, we are very, very fortunate to have a very strong and deep relationship with the US and US investors, and also with Portuguese American investors.
Stephan, while I have you, a few questions related to your comments. Are there restrictions for US residents to invest in non-US registered stock? And can you invest from an American bank, or do you need to have money in Portugal?
So it depends on your purpose. If you are, for example, seeking a golden visa, which there are American nationals that want to have a golden visa and a residency in Portugal, then you need to open up a Portuguese bank account. But if not, if you are just an investor in, say, our fund and don't need a golden visa, you can have, you know, a bank account anywhere and send your money from over there. And if you are investing in a startup, likewise, I mean, there's absolutely no problem in you, as long as you pass, you know, regular know your customer regulations, to sort of invest directly or through funds from wherever you are, in particular from a US bank account. It just happens that for golden visa investors, of which that we have quite a few now in the latest fund, because we started accepting those types of investors, for that purpose, you need to open up a Portuguese bank account. But you can do it online. In some banks, you actually don't need to come here.
All right, thank you.
Although you should, if you can.
So to all of you, which market segments are hot? Which geographies in Portugal are hot? And if you're going to start a business, who do you want to start meeting with? Miguel?
I think Olga wants to tell something about it.
Olga,
so please go ahead.
No problem, no problem. Well, right now we have very good examples of very good investments all over the country. And new areas are surging. Like, you couldn't imagine that you would have good investments in Coimbra, for instance, because it's a more university city. But we are having new investments in Coimbra, Braga, of course, Porto, Aveiro. So it's not Lisbon, only Lisbon anymore. We have very good people, very skilled people in the north of Portugal, in the center of Portugal. And of course, people try to go to other locations, not being so concentrated in one area, because the resources may start being harder to find. So now in Portugal, you have clusters like the tech companies aren't only anymore in Lisbon, they are in Porto and Braga. The automotive industry is in a lot of cities in the country, and you have as well the life sciences cluster in Coimbra. So you can tell that you only have one hot region, and especially in this new, with this new situation, with these new constraints regarding the pandemic, people look for places with less population. And I just want to add that you have a very good telecommunication infrastructure, so you can literally be anywhere. If your position, if your work allows to be anywhere, you can be anywhere in the country.
Thank you. So, Olga, let's say that I'm a US company. We'll start sort of a potentially large investment, and then we'll go to a potentially small investment. And I'm interested in maybe, setting up a new factory in Portugal, a large investment. I come to AICEP, to your firm and agency. What happens?
So first of all, we will give you all the information related to the sector where you want to invest, where you are a player. And we will start following you since the first steps in the country. We will put you in contact with the relevant entities to know more about the licensing processes. If you are an industrial project or if you are a service company, it's much easier. So we start giving you all the information about the country and the competitive factors when you are fighting with other countries. And then we, as I mentioned before, we put you in contact with peer companies. So mainly North America. Imagine if you are a US investor, you can talk with US investors that are already in the country, and they will give you their statement to help you to understand better and what you have to consider when establishing a business in Portugal. And after your decision, we still support you in your activity, and you will have a key account manager that can help you with everything that you need related to your investment.
Very good, very good. It sounds like a lot of personal attention and service.
It is.
Joe, can I just adjust one thing? I don't want to compete with AICEP for sure, but I'm great. It will be great to take advantage of the fact to be in this wonderful panel to say that at Startup Lisboa, a few years ago, we decided to organize an initiative called Launch in Lisbon. And why? Because we always have so many people asking for our help. Can you put me in contact with this entrepreneur or in this sector of activity? Can you help me to set up my company, and so on and so on? So in a certain moment, we decide, why not to create a program that helps everyone that wants to move to Lisbon, a company himself or doesn't matter, can be a freelancer, a founder of a startup, a multinational guy, doesn't matter. What we need is to have the right framework to explain to these people what it means to be living and working and investing in Portugal. So for that, we organize an intensive program for 3 days. For now, it's completely remote online, so it's even easier to be part of that, and where we have partnership with very good partners to help everyone to understand about the tax regime, about the labor market, about the real estate, about the local ecosystem, and so on and so on, and give them a great overview about what they need to know if they are thinking to move or to invest in Portugal. And we'll have our next edition at the end of this month in October. Unfortunately, I completely forgot the concrete dates, but I will try to see it. But in our website,
to October 30th, October 28th through October 30th.
Thank you so much, Joe. Wonderful. That's so embarrassing. You know the dates and I don't. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's it, precisely. But as you know, here it's already 9 o'clock in the evening here in Portugal, so I'm a little bit tired already, if I can excuse myself with that. But that's just to announce this, because I think that can help a lot if someone that is following us in this conversation and has some curiosity about about these questions. Please don't hesitate, come on and be part of this initiative called Launch in Lisbon. Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
If I may sort of, Joe, if I may sort of add a little yes. color to your questions about locations and what are we talking about in terms of industries. I concur with Olga that there's amazing opportunities throughout the country. particularly on the tech sector. I mean, Lisbon is obviously a big center, but we have companies from Braga to Caldas da Rainha. I'm not sure if everybody knows on the call where is Caldas da Rainha or Leiria, but these are supposedly small cities, but with amazing sort of universities and technical institutes that really produce high quality engineering, and in particular high quality life sciences. I mean, Portugal has an amazing sort of breadth and depth of life sciences professionals and scientists, particularly female, which is the vast majority of professionals in this area. So it's, again, just to reinforce, it's not only about Lisbon, but Lisbon is obviously a great way to start, and particularly Startup Lisboa, which is the biggest and most organized incubator in the country. And I just give you a little bit of a sense of how things are going in terms of technology. In our case, we invested 23 million or 22 million last year into our portfolio, and those same companies have already raised 250 million euros of follow-on capital. And we're talking about follow-on capital from all over the world. So from the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Abu Dhabi, from funds in Silicon Valley, from funds in Germany, from funds from the Middle East and London and so on. So Portuguese tech does attract a lot of capital. It's obviously a winner-takes-all kind of industry. So it's a few companies that attract the vast majority of the capital, but they are not necessarily from Lisbon. So that's good news, that things are not too concentrated and that we have capacity from all over the country. In particular, Portugal is, in terms of sectors, which you asked, is more of a B2B enterprise sector, because the nature of the market in Portugal for B2C is kind of actually inexistent, right? It's a small market with not too high purchasing power. So typically Portuguese engineers find global solutions for enterprises. And so we're particularly strong in B2B software as a service companies and B2B and B2C marketplaces, to give you just a little bit of color and examples of how things are going.
Excellent, thank you. So Guilherme, I want to get back to a few legal specifics that I want to make sure our audience gets before we depart. And we have about 8 minutes before we depart. And that is tax. So if an investor resides in the United States, they're going to be taxed by the United States. And if they make money in Portugal, they're going to be taxed by Portugal. Is there a tax system here whereby the investor can actually keep some of the money they make, and rather than have it all go to the government?
Yes, there is. There is a dual taxation system that tries to support and to protect the investors, and actually we have also some benefits for the foreign investors. And so I believe it's a question that can be solved, and the Portuguese government is always trying to create some benefits from the investors who wants to invest in Portugal, namely for the US investors. So it is a question that can be obviously solved. I'm not specialized in tax, I'm being honest with you, but obviously there are some experts in Portugal that can handle that problem and that can create some solutions for that. And the legal system is based on that goal, to support the foreign investors and US investors to invest in Portugal.
Thank you. So another legal related question that's very important for an investor to consider is, let's say that the investor, whether large or small, is going to have an employee or employees in Portugal. We know that Europe is traditionally very protective of labor. Can you fire someone in Portugal if they're not performing, or if there are other issues? How easy or how difficult is it?
Well, we do not apply in Portugal the so-called employment at will doctrine that you apply in the US, under which you can dismiss any employee without just cause. Here there is a constitutional prohibition for dismissal without just cause. So it is not so easy as in the US to dismiss somebody, to dismiss an employee, but nevertheless, we have both subjective just cause and objective just cause. Subjective just cause is based on a misconduct by the employee, but there is also some situations in which you can dismiss an employee based on an economic situation and economic problems regarding the corporation. And so in that case, it is not so difficult to dismiss an employee because you just have to sustain the dismissal based on an economic crisis of the corporation. For example, nowadays we are facing an economic crisis due to the coronavirus pandemic. And obviously the government tried everything to avoid dismissals and collective dismissals and created a special regime, a layoff regime that tries to keep the employment by supporting the corporations and paying part of the salaries. But if there is a huge crisis and if the corporation really needs to dismiss an employee, it can do it. And the severance compensations that were very, very high until these decades, now they are not so high. They decreased. Just to give an example, until 2010, to dismiss an employee based on an economic just cause, you had to pay 30 days per year of seniority of the employee. Nowadays, that amount was reduced to 12 days per year. So it's quite very different, and things are not so rigid as they were 2 or 3 decades ago. All right. So it is not an issue, I would say.
All right. So
May I add? Yes.
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
Can I just add some sort of like battlefront sort of examples? Well, number one, regarding taxation, I must say, and you know this, Joe, investing through funds is extremely tax efficient. I mean, it has because of double taxation treatments and also because of the asset class itself. Investors, depending on whether they invest through a company or individual, pay between 0 and tax% on any sort of distributions that occur over the 10-year life of the fund. So it's a very, very efficient way to invest, and you pay very little tax effectively. And actually, Portugal is very tax favorable regime regarding investment in funds. The second thing regarding layoffs and firing people, of course, it's not the same as the US, but I've heard in the past people saying, well, I'm maybe even foreign residents here, I might not open a company because it's difficult to sort of fire people. That's ridiculous, right? I mean, there's thousands and thousands of companies and there's a working open economy in Portugal. Yes, it's not the same as the US, but I have not encountered examples where you cannot agree with someone that they have to go, and it's not going to cost you your company. So that's a myth. We would all like it to be more flexible, but if it was that bad, we wouldn't be one of the most advanced economies in the world, because ultimately Portugal is one of the most advanced economies in the world, next to its European partners. So I think that's really sort of a bit of a myth and not a huge problem. Then in practical life, we've had now to lay off part of our staff in our companies during the crisis, and it's done, right? I mean, you reach an agreement, there's mechanisms and so on, and it's not as complicated as sometimes people think abroad.
And if you compare with France and Germany and even Spain,
for sure,
our legislation is more flexible, both in terms of firing and also in terms of managing the corporation regarding the labor issues than those countries.
But even I would say, Guilherme, on bureaucracy, I can say we have investments in Germany, and Germany, as we all know, is a very efficient country and so on. But try and do an investment in Germany. You're going to have to go there and sign 50,000 papers and be revised by X amount of authorities. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions sometimes about bureaucracy. There's also bureaucracy in the US. There's bureaucracy everywhere, which is important. It's not as bad as people think, and otherwise, there would be no economy.
So we have just 3 or 4 minutes left, and I'd like to pose 2 questions. One is from the audience, and it is, can you, perhaps Stephan, you can start on this, can any of you recommend particular funds to invest in, and what institutions, brokerage firms can you use to invest in them? And if you cannot provide advice of where to invest, perhaps you can provide advice of who to ask where to invest. Stephan, would you start?
Well, I'm not going to sort of recommend investing in my own fund, of course. That would be a little bit too much. I would say that first of all, people need to think what asset class they want to be exposed to. You know, at what percentage of their wealth they want to expose to the Portuguese industry that they choose to invest with. We have a strong partnership with a wealth manager called Golden Assets, which is one of the largest in the country. And they have us, obviously, has an example of a brokerage and a wealth manager, but a wealth manager that also accepts fairly small amounts. You know, it's not Goldman Sachs, so you don't have to be a multi-millionaire to sort of have their services. And they have a breadth of products that, you know, goes from, you know, your typical equities to bonds to private equity and VC and real estate investment. So I would approach someone like that because the banks in general, the problem is that they only sell their own product. So nothing against the banks, but I think that, you know, an independent wealth manager or brokerage is probably more suitable because they have more option.
Anyone else?
Completely agree about what Stephan said, and I can say what he can. Please invest in Indico. It's a very good player in our ecosystem, and of course it's not very nice from him to say that, but I can assure you that they know what they are doing, and it's something that changed also in the last few years in Portugal, is the fact that for now we have already some VCs that they really know what means to invest in this particular field of startups, because it's not the same to invest in these scalability business models that we are looking for, or in a small or medium company, or even a big company, but it's not in the market with this same framework as a startup. And it's very important to have professional investors and people. The best way to put money in startups, it's not starting investing directly in the companies, because of course, as you know, if we are talking about innovative business models, innovative companies, it's always a big risk, and the single way, in my view, to minimize this risk is to put your money in the hands of professionals, VCs, that they know how invest, where invest, and they can mitigate the risk because they deal with a very big portfolio of companies. So, of course, investing in a fund like Indico could be a very good idea if you are looking for this kind of opportunities. And you can call the public entities to know about this, namely Portugal Ventures, that is the national public company related with the VC firms, or you can call AICEP for sure, or you have always law firms that are more than available to help you on that. I would say, as we said before, come and try and starting doing business in Portugal, and you'll see by yourself that can be a good bet for. That's what I need what I want to say for now. Okay.
Very good. So I have, we are out of time. I have many more questions, so which is proof that this is quite a fascinating topic. But one last question, if each of you could provide a brief response to, if you were an investor residing in North America, and you were thinking about investing in Portugal as opposed to another country, would you? Olga, would you give us a thought?
I definitely would. I forgot to mention something important related with funds in a certain way. So beyond this, all the support that I mentioned, we negotiate the incentives. So that's, I talked a little about it, but we negotiate the incentives. So if you want to invest in Portugal, you go to AICEP and we'll provide you all the information and we give you the incentives. Plus, we have, in these crazy times, we had a big transformation as well as other companies. And we started doing virtual visits to Portugal. So you don't need, because now you can't, unless you have a very important reason, you can travel to Portugal. We still organize these visits with all the entities. So the companies can keep doing the work of prospection. If you want to choose Portugal instead of other country, you can still do your work of prospection. And we actually won a project during the pandemic with a totally remote prospection and totally remote work without a visit to Portugal. But of course, to the ones who know Portugal, it's worth a visit and you better do it. But yeah, I will definitely invest in Portugal because of everything that we mentioned in this session.
Excellent. Guilherme, your thought?
No, the same for me, obviously. I would invest in Portugal and even live in Portugal. Portugal, it's a good country for living. We have the rule of law. We have an open market. We have wonderful infrastructures network based on roads and broadband and so on. We have a good national healthcare system, and we have political stability as well, and a wonderful weather and good people. So obviously, I would invest in Portugal and even live in Portugal if possible.
Stephan?
Well, I mean, I think that it's a country full of opportunity. And why? Because in sort of more in bigger countries and more developed countries in Northern Europe, you have more competition. So where you have more competition, you have a more perfect market. There's less opportunities. In a country where there is a more imperfect market, in the sense that there's less market players or less capital, the people that have, that know what they're doing, they'll do well. So it's sometimes more enticing to say invest in Germany, but there's a lot of people competing for the same deal in Germany. You can get a better deal in Portugal. So if you're smart, if you know what you're doing, Portugal is a very, very good opportunity.
Very good. And Miguel?
I think that everything was said already, and I just can reinforce this idea that you will find very good opportunities. It doesn't matter in which sector, in which region, for sure, from wine to gastronomy to tech companies to traditional sectors of activities like shoes and textile and so on, or even real estate or tourism, you will find for sure very good opportunities to invest. And the best way to know that is starting, exploring the country and the opportunities, and you will see by yourself that you will be more than happy to start this journey in Portugal, for sure.
Well, outstanding. This concludes our session. I want to thank all four of you so very, very much for your thoughts and insights. I want to thank the audience for staying with us and for all their excellent questions. Special thanks to Minister Pedro Siza Vieira and the Ministry for the prepared remarks, and also a special thanks to PALCUS and its partners, especially Angela Costa Simões, whose tireless work organized this conference. Thank you so very, very much, and I look forward to seeing the four of you in person the next time I come to your respective cities. Have a good afternoon and a good night.
I'd like to thank you
so much
on behalf of PALCUS as well.
Lisa, thank you for all of your background work. Lisa is our Zoom expert, and she has made this seamless. Thank you so much, Lisa.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Stay safe. Bye.